indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. I would take a motion to approve the consent or the regular agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Sean, seconded by Bruce. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Consent agenda. There's no questions there. I would take a motion to approve.
So moved.
I have one
Oh,
change to that. In your packet, there's an additional, under the Carboni's Pizza and Sports Bar,
yeah,
they've done a name change to Smoke and Fire.
yep,
That didn't make it onto the list, but I do believe that Barb gave an updated,
we got,
and just so you guys are aware that it will be the Smoke and Fire moving forward, not Carboni's.
okay,
I take that as a friendly amendment.
okay. Rick made a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Maggie seconded it. Is there any other discussion? So they won't have to apply for a new license because it's same owners?
Right. Yep, everything's the same, they're just changing the name, so.
Okay.
I got a couple of questions on the accounts payable. Under administration, the Safe Assure Consultant Safety Training, what was?
Yes, so Safe Assure is our new safety consultant.
Okay.
And we do our monthly trainings with them. Let's see exactly what that is. I know that, I was going to let you all know, during miscellaneous, about CPR stuff. Let me look here. But, yeah, so Safe Assure, safety training, I'm guessing that is their, kind of their monthly, that we go out to them. I can check exactly what that is, but.
What's that under?
Under administration, that's why I
Administration,
found it.
page 6, administration.
If it was under police or something, maybe I could have understood it, but the fact that it was under administration, I was just kind of curious about it.
So I would have to look to see exactly why it got coded there, but yeah, usually, that encompasses basically all of staff, whether it's office staff or public works staff,
Okay.
that sort of thing, so.
It's allocated out, Josh, for different departments.
Oh, is it?
Like you'll see it under planning.
Oh, yeah, it is. If you scroll down under planning, on the bottom of that page, there's an allocation there too. Under police, then on the next page, there's an allocation. So it's allocated, kind of spread out amongst all of them.
What is the total cost for that then? Is it
$12,000 for the year. Yeah.
12,000? Okay.
So we switched from MMUA that we had for almost 20 years to Safe Assure, which we switched to beginning of this year. We went out for prices. Safe Assure was about $3,000 cheaper.
Okay.
And we just weren't quite satisfied with the safety program we had with MMUA.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Anything else?
No, that's it.
Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. All right, facility study update, Wold Architects. You're up.
So Mitch, I do believe there should be someone from Baker Tilly on as well.
Yeah, good afternoon. Steve Scharf here from Baker Tilly.
Hi, Steve.
Well, good evening, Mayor and Council. We're here tonight to just kind of re-engage in the conversation that we had a number of months ago related to some of the facility solutions that we had presented. I know we presented a lot of information at that meeting, and today's meeting is really to kind of talk through some of those options, see if there are any questions or comments related to those options, talk a little bit about some of the numbers related to some of the financing stuff the city administrator has been working on. And then we did spend some time looking at ways that we can adjust kind of the recommended solution to get it to be a little bit more in alignment with current needs and some of the financing stuff. But in summary, what we had talked about at our last meeting was basically 3 different scenarios on how we might solve some of the facility issues. Scenario 1 really looked at moving the police department off of this campus here, doing an addition and renovation to the fire station. doing a addition onto the onto the Public Works facility for the Parks garage. So that would then get rid of the garage that is in poor condition here. And then looking at doing some midterm renovations to City Hall, either right after the police project is done or whenever that makes the most sense to do that. The financing of the dollar amounts that we have in there kind of reflect moving forward with that soon after the police facility is constructed. And then long-term, just kind of looking at service delivery things related to the fire station. In looking at the scenario 2, this really looked at if we were to start all over again with a new City Hall police facility and with, again, that same addition to the Public Works facility for the Parks Garage is somewhat consistent throughout. And then looking at some smaller interventions in the following years for Public Works and the utility building and maybe the clubhouse, depending upon discussions related to rec services. And then again, the fire station. This one clearly has the largest first cost because you'd be looking at new construction for both facilities. And then our third scenario really looked at not doing much of anything here, just doing some deferred maintenance work, at least initially, but really putting most of the effort into that midterm. And so I think the biggest learning that we had for that is that that has the largest midterm cost, mainly because of inflation and the cost of doing all of that work at one time. So while that was an exercise to kind of look at, if we need to delay things, certainly that is not the direction that we're looking at going right now. And so we kind of reconvened with the administrator and really kind of talked about what we might be able to bring forward today based on the ability for the city to bond for projects. And we think looking at a solution that has, some dollars spent in the short term for police with some, maybe some minor work here at City Hall to move people around, and then taking care of that, the Parks garage that's in the worst condition would take care of those first, two major priorities that we know need to be done here. And we think we can get that initial scenario 1 short term to about a $15 million project, which would envision doing that police facility out there at the fire station, and then doing that Parks garage or as an addition onto that Public Works facility. And so that really kind of ties to the financing piece of it, but I'd pause first if there are any questions on the scenarios that we had put together from that first presentation. I think we are kind of honing in on what the recommended plan would be, which is to do this scenario 1 short term and then look, out into the midterm as to when it would make sense to do some work in this building once you get the police department out. Yes, sir.
Does scenario 1 include the demolition?
Of the Parks garage, yes, it does.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And then scenario 1 with the renovations of 300,000, is that renovations to which?
To the fire station.
Okay.
Yeah.
Renovations to make them flow together
Gotcha.
than once you've attached it.
Okay.
So one of the things we started talking about, which is why we're able to look at some different cost scenarios, is after meeting with the chief, we started to talk a little bit about how we could blend those two buildings together. Certainly there are some opportunities in there, but there's also some operational things that we would probably want to talk with the fire department and the police department together to make sure on where those connections are. So we wanted to make sure we had enough of a budget in there to maybe modify some of the office areas and in that area where the two buildings would connect together to make sure that we have a way to connect into the fire station that makes sense so that we could look at some sharing opportunities in that building. So in order to get to where we want to be, there was some discussion related to what is it going to cost to do this work. And so I know that city administrator's been working with your bond counsel on a couple of different, all of these scenarios here, and I think I'll let you speak to this, and if there are any questions, we can certainly go back to the options, so.
Okay, thank you.
See if this works. I know it didn't work in the past. So, I did speak with Baker Tilly and, Doug Green, who normally helps us with this stuff, wasn't able to be here tonight because he had a prior, commitment, but, it does sound like, Steve is joining us out of his office, and it'll kind of help me be able to explain, what some of this stuff is. So, could you grab mine by chance, Mitch? Looking at everything but what I want it to be. So, looking at scenario one then over here, we kind of broke down as, put $15 million in here as to what we expect it to cost. And I know speaking with, Baker Tilly, we could repay up to 30 years, but initially they put 25 in there. And then an expected interest rate of about 4%, because right now, that was their estimate on what we think we would get on the sort of financing we'd be going for. So at that, we'd be looking at an annual payment of roughly $960,000 a year. Then their sheets also broke that out as to what that would potentially look like for an increase on property taxes, depending on the evaluations, ranging anywhere from about an extra $250 a year for a $250,000 house to over $400 a year for a house valued at $400,000, as well as into commercial. Commercial obviously is going to see a higher tax rate out of this because they do pay higher taxes than residential values. Part of what is hindering us, I guess I say, or limiting us a little bit, is there are restrictions based on the valuations and how much we actually can bond for this. One of the big restrictions, and Steve might be able to explain this a little better than I can, has to do, capital improvement plan bonds are really restricted based on your estimated market value in the city. And using the formula of basically 0.16% of the estimated market value in New Prague would get us to an annual payment of $1.36 million. Now, part of that 1.36 is being used up by our fire station bond, which we are currently still paying out about $374,000 a year. So that means we are restricted if using a capital improvement plan bond to a payment of $986,000 a year. So if we were able to get a 4% interest rate and keep it under $15 million, we would still be able to slide in and meet that requirement per se. Steve, are you there?
I am, yes.
Yes. So maybe you could explain to them, because you maybe understand a little better than I do, what these various bond types or abilities to borrow that we would have. Can you see the screen right now that's got my...
Yeah, I can. Thank you, and good evening, Mayor and members of the council. Looking at these types of projects, there are various different statutory authorities that are worth considering. One that was mentioned already is that capital improvement plan statute, and that's that 475 spot 521, the second one kind of in the list here. I should note kind of the first three are all listed. They're all general obligation bonds, which receives the full faith and credit backing of the city, very strong credit quality, and that typically translates to pretty much the same cost of borrowing between the three options, starting from left and moving to the right. And then the last one being a lease revenue bond issuance. This would typically involve some form of an economic development authority with a varying lease structure, set up between the city and the economic development authority, with the investor kind of purchasing an interest, kind of in that lease as another option. This one generally comes with a higher cost of borrowing. It's not the full faith and credit backing of the city, although still a very strong credit. Not quite as strong as the city's GO, but still an option in terms of financing for this project. If we focus on the capital improvement plan statute, this project fits quite well on that. Just a couple of things worth highlighting. It doesn't require voter approval. You can of course see on the list here, it goes out, you're allowed to finance out to 30 years. There is a reverse referendum process that requires a 30-day reverse referendum after a public hearing with some varying notices for that public hearing and different approval requirements. And as was mentioned, you are confined to the limitation of, every bond issue within that statute, you have to stay within 0.16% of your estimated market value. General obligation sales tax revenue bonds are another option that we look at. Again, similar term structure. It is a general obligation again, so that your cost of debt would be very similar to the other first two options. But it would require going through the procedure of imposing that sales tax and passing a resolution with that intent and kind of declaring the project along with the expected tax rate, and then getting legislative approval on that, and then going through a formal election process to get that approved. So those are kind of the various options. I think I focused primarily on the second and third, but the first one really kind of being pretty similar to the capital improvement plan statute. I will say we generally see 475 spot 521 being used quite often for these projects. So it's one of the more common ones we would look at relative to the referendum bonds. So I'll stop there for questions. Hopefully I've helped clarify a little bit on kind of the various statutory options.
Steve, if we take that additional debt on, what would that do for our bond or for our ratings with Moody's or whoever when we moving forward? I mean, is this going to limit us or cost us more? And are we going to take a hit on our bond rating so that we have to, or our Moody's rating in order to, that would potentially hurt us 5 years from now or 6 years from now or 15 years for other bonds that we might need?
Yeah, no, that's certainly a great question and definitely one that we're cognizant of the likelihood of happening. Typically, you don't see a single bond issue push you down into a different rating category unless you've already kind of been considered having a high debt burden from the rating agencies to begin with. And usually an issuer of your credit quality, that's not usually the case in the state of Minnesota. I wouldn't expect just directly, this particular bond issue of the sizes we're discussing to necessarily drive a change in rating. I'd certainly look at that moving forward, once we sort of continue to narrow in on a plan. But I wouldn't expect that just at face value from this particular bond issue. If that were to happen, the change in interest rates for a rating change by 1 or 2 notches, and ratings generally move. They're called notches. AAA being the highest, and kind of the lower A range being towards the bottom of the investment grade. But usually that change represents about a 0.1 to 0.2% increase in your rate for every notch downwards. So that's one caveat to that, but hopefully that answers your question. I wouldn't necessarily directly expect a change in your rating just off of this issuance.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Josh, what is the maturity of the fire bond?
Yeah, that has to be coming up.
I don't have it off the top of my head. I can certainly
that a
get that
20
back
year?
to you. Can you look that up, Robin?
And then this, limitation on the principal and interest, that would be a limiting condition well into the future then, correct?
Correct, yeah, I mean, so I guess the idea would be that over time, your estimated market value would grow, but yes, as long as that bond has not been paid off, it would limit future use, yes.
Future
Of that particular, method of bonding.
Oh, it wouldn't affect like general obligation
So
that we
I
do for
believe street
improvement.
projects are kind of a different geo bond type, as, yeah, the only current debt that we have that counts against this is our fire station debt.
Okay.
Yeah, if I could add to that, the Series 13B, which I think is the fire station debt or the portion that financed the fire station debt, I think that falls off in 2028. But you're exactly right. This is applicable to bonds issued under the capital improvement plan statute. So for example, utility improvements under 444 statute or street improvements under 429, those aren't applicable to the statute, and this limit does not apply to those other statutes.
Okay.
I understand there's 4 different alternatives here for financing, but this would seem to be the most used one, and probably the most one that we use in the future for future improvement. So, because we're kind of going right to the top here, we're pretty much using all the firepower well into the future then. And when we're talking about all these different scenarios going out into the next 10, 20, or 30 years, we don't really have the ability to finance it unless we do a referendum that's voted by the citizens. Correct?
I mean, that's kind of how I'd interpret this, Steve, unless Steve understands this differently.
No, that'd be correct. Yeah, as your market value increases, we would see additional capacity. But certainly, if you were to finance effectively the limit under the statute, moving forward, you'd have to see a significant increase in market value to provide for additional capacity.
I mean, just off the top of your head, we wouldn't be able to finance the second tier of this, any of these second
Scenario.
scenarios in the future. I guess just to think about that, to make sure that we're thinking about this, we might be one and done for quite some time in this. And then I was just wondering, Josh, the material that you on the screen is different than what we have in our packet. Was the 18 million?
So the 18.5 was the first number. I think that was the scenario 1 number under the last time
Okay.
John came before you to present. As I was playing with the Excel document, I figured out that it was roughly 15 million that would get us under that limit number. And then so that's when John and Tim sat down and really pieced out what exactly would we need in this police station going forward, and we're able to get that number down from 18.5 to 15.
So 18.5 was the amount that we thought we needed. We couldn't, it doesn't fit into the financing, so we cut the
So we got it down to, yeah.
police building.
Yeah, police plus parks, we think we could do for 15.
And most of that is reducing the size of the police garage, as I understand it. Is that correct?
For the most part, and then there's some efficiencies in circulation as we were talking through that we were able to get that program size down a little bit. There's also, we had talked square footage numbers, cost per square foot, and so we've adjusted those a little bit too to kind of reflect that we may not see as much construction inflation in the coming years. We were projecting a little bit more conservatively at the last meeting, so we made a few of those adjustments, understanding that the 15 million was something we needed to take a harder look at.
And this is a kind of a different comment or question that's kind of outside of this, but I know that in our balance sheet for years, the city's been putting money aside for a city
Correct.
building. Is that anticipated to be used in this?
At this point, we have not planned for that use. What is there, about 1.5, I think, roughly in there? Do you remember? Allocated for City Hall? Certainly over $1 million. I think it's close to 1.5 in cash we currently have sitting aside.
I think we would want to do some homework to that because I'm not sure if that was really dedicated. It's money that if we took that out, would that affect our balance sheet in such a way that it might affect our credit rating as well?
Yep, I do know as part of our credit rating that came back, they did mention our debt load, but that it was quite common to what we have to most Minnesota cities. But they did also, we did get high marks, I guess you could say, for the amount of cash that we currently carry on hand. So that would be something we'd want to look at.
Can you explain the calculation of the levy impact? I'm looking at a, 4.6 million in the 2023 levy. I don't know where that number comes from.
Where are you looking at?
It's on
Oh,
right
the
there.
presentation, yeah.
So that 4.6 million for the levy was the amount that we certified for the levy in 2023. That we approved with our budget here back in December. We approved a $4.6 million levy. So with the, where'd that go?
Reverted back to my screen.
Oh. So if we were to add roughly 960,000, then that would be a 21% increase on the total levy that happened.
Okay.
I mean, really, when you break it down, the total levy is 4.6, but there's an operating levy and a debt service levy in there as well. But yes, your total levy would increase about 21%. 1.5.
I think I had mentioned this the last time we had talked. I'd feel much better if I could get a tour of and show me some of the issues that we're having and maybe where. It's one thing to look on a map, but something else to be standing within the building and say, okay, now this is gonna be extended this way, and this is where we're gonna have our various rooms, and this is, I mean, I can't even tell you the last time I was down in the Parks garage down here to see. It sounds like it's in horrible condition, but I can't visually picture it.
Yeah.
I think that would be helpful, at least for me, before I start spending $15 million of the taxpayer money.
Yeah, I mean, you guys are certainly invited to tour any facilities if you want. I mean, if you'd like, we can certainly set up something that we can show you the various facilities as they currently stand and kind of what we're looking at.
I'd like that, so I don't know how I'd go about.
Yeah, well,
Do you wanna do it singular, or do you wanna do it as a council? Do you wanna?
so I mean, one or two might be easiest. Once we hit three, then we'll have to advertise.
Yes, that's what I'm getting
You guys are
at.
all hanging out. But I can certainly, we can reach out starting tomorrow and just see what we can work on schedules and that
Sure,
sort of thing.
that'd be great. Okay,
I think that's a good first step. I think I would feel more comfortable instead of making a decision in this environment is if we maybe had a working session, just to dig deeper, and get a better understanding of all that it encompasses. I just don't feel that this venue really gives us that opportunity to maybe ask.
Yeah,
questions.
we can do that. I know, I think right now, John and Wold are really kind of looking for kind of what your guys' thoughts are. Are we going in the right direction, do you think, at this point? Is what we're talking about completely off the rails, and why even continue at this point? I don't think at this point, we're not necessarily making a decision that, all right, they said it, we're building a new police station, or not at this point. It's really guidance, I think, is what he's looking, correct me if I'm wrong, from the council is of what we're doing. It's certainly a process that'll continue before anything is signed.
yeah, it's further than we've ever done.
That's true.
And, I support having it over by the fire station, and, I mean, we have to have this stuff, something, it, now or later, but we're gonna have to have it at some time, so.
I think if I may, Mayor and Council, I think it was really, like I said at the beginning, we threw a lot of information out there at the last meeting, and what we wanted to do is to have an opportunity to get back in front of you, talk a little bit about what the impact is on the scenarios, so that we could say, okay, well, we're really not gonna do scenario 2. because it just doesn't make sense to do that. Get some dialogue around, are we comfortable with exploring in more detail a addition onto the fire station to create a public safety facility? I spent some time with the chief to go through programmatically what a police station would look like separated from City Hall, because there was the question asked, are there some sharing opportunities? What do those things look like? I think there's some more work to be done with that. In your packet is a detailed program of that conversation that we had last week. But again, in my conversation with the chief, there is still questions related to lobby, related to meeting rooms, related to some of those shared spaces in that building that I think need to develop over time if the council is interested in moving forward with a project at that location. I would enjoy sitting down at a work session, just kind of talking through, why the program is what it is. Sometimes we've done these where we've done a work session where we've done a tour at the beginning, so we have some common language to talk about, okay, we saw this is where that deficiency is, here's how we're solving it. And, certainly individual tours is great, but we've also, as part of a work session, spent the first, half an hour as a group walking through the building. Nice thing is it's right here, so it's easy to see it all. And then to reconvene and kind of talk through some of, why the recommendations are what they are. So I might offer that up too as a possibility. If you're interested in that, certainly I'm happy to go through the detail of what the program says today, if we want to go through that. But I'm also happy to defer that until we can get a work session scheduled where we can kind of talk through some of the detail. I'd even bring a plan of the fire station and we can kind of talk about some of those spaces that in there that, how we might connect it together and some of the kind of site planning stuff that we talked about as well. So I think that would be a good use of time if the council is interested in that.
Quick question, if we were to do a work, session, or, would we need, if we go up there two at a time, and go around with him? Do we need to post it that way, or?
Well, I mean, so if we're doing a work session, we're all gonna be here anyway
Yeah.
talking about it, so that would be posted already. And so, I mean, if we just did the tour during that time, then it would, I mean, it'd be no different. We'd post, because we're already posting to be here, it would just be part of the agenda.
So we just need to, on a work session, put it down for a special work session?
Yeah.
How do others on the council feel about that?
I think it's a great idea.
Yep.
I'd like to do it.
I would too.
You wanna talk date tonight, or you want me to bring back calendars and we can
It'd be
bring back our
nice.
schedules next week or 2 weeks from now?
Yeah.
I'm kind of looking forward to, maybe it might be nicer outside when we're outside.
Okay, I'll bring back I'll bring back a calendar, at our next meeting and we can get that work session.
Yeah.
At that work session, I think one of the topics, I guess, I would like to see or think about is maybe a 2 or 3 year projection for the city's, a summary kind of financial projection to show, because this is gonna put more constraints on our ability to levy or desire to levy in the future, and how do we sit in other departments, and is this gonna constrict things that we wanna do in the next 2 to 3 years or 4 years?
Okay.
And so if we have a kind of at least a thumbnail projection from maybe some help from our auditor or someone that would help us with that.
Yep. I can certainly get that together.
And then, scenario 3 talked about just deferred maintenance of like $5 million and whatnot. I'm kind of thinking that even if we would do something like that, and I support the scenario 1, first of all, we probably have to finance that in a short period of time, so it would have probably it would have a significant effect on our levy, even though it's a much smaller amount we're borrowing because we're paying it off quicker.
Probably.
I think, and then we're repairing or maintaining a building that I think you thought we're on our last legs with that building, so.
It would, any sort of major renovation of this building would want to understand what, I would not recommend doing a significant renovation of this building without taking care of some of the exterior envelope issues at the same time. So certainly one of the, one of the things to keep in mind in scenario 3, that really only focuses on the exterior envelope and some of the, mechanical systems and some of that type of stuff. Some of the interior stuff would be taken care of as part of a renovation project. So the deferred maintenance number gets a little bit off if you decide to do, let's say we decide to do renovation, move some offices into where the police department is. You would take care of some of the things that we identified. So the 1.8 million really deferred maintenance here really focuses mostly on the big ticket items with windows, roofs, exterior tuck pointing, and some of those types of things, so.
So if you were looking at these various scenarios and you were thinking that we really only have that opportunity to do a bond issue for this dollar amount, would you still lay out the scenarios the same way, or would you look at it differently?
I think that from everything that we've talked about, the two largest needs right now are in police and in the public works garage. Now, perhaps you'll have a different opinion of that when you do a walkthrough on that. So scenario 1 focuses on those things right away. The only challenge that you have is that once you move the police department out, you still have some things you should be thinking about for this building, whether it's that 1.8 million in deferred maintenance or moving some people around. So that's the only struggle related to the 15 million. It really doesn't leave much room for any work in this building. And so to your point, there is, some monies that are set aside for City Hall renovations that, million and a half would get, you quite a ways in some of that type of work here. So it's probably some combination of that would get you pretty far down the road of that, at least through that midterm piece of work, so.
Okay.
So I won't go
Thank
through
you.
all of the detail. We'll save the programmatic stuff for the work session, and we'll bring some drawings of the building and some of that type of stuff so you can kind of get a sense of what we're talking about as we go through that.
Would you have like a mock-up of the new police facility, kind of?
Probably not to that level.
Okay.
But we can talk anecdotally about where some of the opportunities are.
Okay.
In there, we would need a much deeper design, discussion that would include the fire chief as well. I'd hate to make some assumptions
I agree.
without getting both chiefs involved in the dialogue, so.
I agree.
But we can get there if we end up going in that direction. That's more of a design process than, the planning process that we're doing, but let's see where the dialogue goes, and we can, take a look at a few things as we wrap things up, so.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank
Great.
you.
Well, thanks for your time tonight.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on, the next item on the agenda is the city engineer projects update. And, I would imagine 5 and 6 are gonna kind of be combined. Am I correct?
That was kind of the plan.
Okay. And then,
Good evening, everybody. Can you hear me okay?
oh, there you are, yes.
Okay. I just want to go through a couple items here. First being the typical update memo. The only ones I'm going to kind of highlight here will be on the 2023 project, which I've got another memo attached to talk about. And the second being the HSIP project, which I believe we're still waiting for the DNR review to get complete, but hopefully that'll be making progress this next month and trying to get that finalized. So I'm just going to go ahead and move on to the bid for the 2023 street utility project.
Yes.
Which was held on Friday, February 24th. There were 9 bids received, and the low bid came from Holtmeyer Construction out of Mankato. This memo I provided you had the incorrect total cost of that bid. It's $3,715,730.65. The resolution is correct, but just wanted to highlight that as mentioned in the memo differently. So slightly under our engineer's estimate from our final engineer's estimates by about 5% and about 8% less than our cost estimate that was put together in the feasibility report. So I think generally we didn't quite see that additional inflationary increase that we were expecting from last year's bids. So we had increased our estimates by about 5%, 5 to 10% based on last year's bidding, and we didn't really see an increase this year. So I do have a breakdown of where all the numbers went to for street, storm, sanitary, and water main. With that, I am recommending award to Holtmeyer Construction out of Mankato, Minnesota.
Okay. That's a new company that's never worked in, New Prague. Are they reputable? Where did he go?
Yes. I can see your screen. Can you hear me or no?
Now we can see you.
Okay. Holtmeyer is likely the largest contractor in Mankato that does this type of work. They do this size project, and they actually completed a $13 million project for SEH in the city of Waldorf just a couple of years ago. So they are a very large contractor. They do very good work.
Okay.
I would have no concern about working with them.
They'll be easy to work with residents.
Yeah. They're on a project for me right now over in Vernon Center as well. Working with residents on that project has gone well.
Okay.
Just curiosity, Chris, the extra $10,000, is that going on the industrial park project or the street?
Yeah, so the business park estimate was, I think, closer to 655 instead of 665. So
Okay.
I had additional $10,000 allocated to the business park than the actual bid. And I did provide those cost lists over to Ken and Josh last week. So I believe 655 was the correct number for the business park. So overall, pretty good bid, and these do include some additional work in the contract from what was initially reviewed during the feasibility report, including a sidewalk that was added to the project late in January, and some wider streets in the business park. And that's probably where the increase from our preliminary cost estimate for the business park really come from, is that the streets were widened from 32 feet to 36 feet. And I think that's why that actually came in higher than our preliminary cost estimate, while the reconstruction project still came in lower.
Okay.
I'll make a motion that we approve
That's what I was getting to.
the bid for Holtmeyer Construction.
That'd be resolution 23-3601.
Okay, resolution 23030601, the 2023 street and utility improvement project.
I'll second.
Okay, so motion was made by Sean, seconded by Maggie. Any other discussion or questions? Hearing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, motion carries. Thank you, Chris.
Thanks, everyone.
I was just trying to get through, hold on.
Other stuff.
All right, next item on the agenda, the public is invited to be heard on matters not on the agenda. The speakers are limited to 5 minutes, and just so you know, the council will take matters under advisement. And does anybody want to speak?
Doug, I'm sure.
Doug, come on up. You got to state your name and your address. Okay.
Probably piping hot about something, aren't you?
I should have worn my hearing aids, but I'll try my best here. Doug Schenecker, and lifelong member of the community. My grandfather was, my father was, obviously, and so we're Everett's here in New Prague. First of all, I'd like to thank you folks for allowing me, mayor, city council members, administrators, and others. It's a big commitment, and I appreciate your commitment to the council and for the city. So I'd like to also thank you for the time. And the only part I kind of disagreed with was the 5 minutes. No, just kidding. It'll be shorter than that. Just a quick brief background. I started with the Scott Soil and Water Conservation District in Scott County, in 1977. At that time, I was in charge of the tree program, and we sold 20 different varieties of trees and built a tree program to distributing over 1 million trees in 1 year. So over time, of the 37 years I was employed with the district, I was very proud to say that I was responsible for at least distributing, not planting them, distributing multi-millions of trees. Anyway, with that, after I retired after 37 years from the Scotts Oil and Water, I started a business because keep my ADHD busy, and it's called Greenhead Turf Management. After 5 years, I was blessed to have over 600 customers, and it was just to be way too much. Got to be way too much, and being retired, so I sold that business. With the turf management business, I also started treating ash trees, by the way, 12 years ago, in the city of New Prague. Since then, a young fellow that worked with me for 5 years took over the business, and I started another business here in town, Ash Tree Treatments Plus. I kept treating the trees because of my respect for trees and love for trees. If there was ever a tree hugger award in the state of Minnesota, I'd probably win it. Anyway, so with that, the reason I'm here, folks, is to discuss the epidemic, serious epidemic that we have in the city of New Prague. I have photos that I'll share with you folks about the city of Belle Plaine. Exactly 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago, may I distribute a couple pictures? The emerald ash borer was found, I think there's
A couple there?
the emerald ash borer was found in Belle Plaine.
You want to give it one to
Minnesota,
Josh
just
too?
down the road. And almost 2 years ago, what was it there before? Yes, it was probably, in my professional opinion, it was there before. But I gave the council a picture of 6 ash trees in Belle Plaine, which is 13 miles to the northwest of here, that are no longer survivable, or well, no longer savable, if you want to call it that. They're dead. The growth you see on the bottom is the last resort of the tree to live. So this dwelling lost 6 trees in a matter of 3 to 4 years, depending on how long, the ash borer was found there. With that said, there's over 1 million trees in Minnesota, ash trees, and it's gonna devastate the whole landscape, folks, of Minnesota. Wherever it comes, it will take them all. It won't be like the Dutch elm disease, which took out red and white elm, and there were some survivors, if you will. The ash borer leaves nothing, absolutely nothing. They usually come in, and they're in for 10 to 12 to 15 years, depending on the growth rate and what's done with the trees once they're infected. City of New Prague, just real biased estimate, I think we have about 60% of our trees in town are ashes. I don't know how to say this politely, but I, as a taxpayer and lifelong resident, my family also, in the city here, I really think you folks, the city council, has to take the bull by the horns and tell people, if you don't take care of your trees, either cut them down or, treat them in some way. And there's ways I can help people treat by themselves. Is it as effective as the treatment that I use? No, it isn't. But I think it's the city council's responsibility to let people know it's here and it's not going away, and there will not be a living ash tree in the city of New Prague, in my opinion, within 8 to 10 years.
Really?
And I know it's scary, and I don't mean to be a prophet of any sort, but if we look at past history, that's exactly what's happened, and it eliminates 100% unless they've been treated or taken care of. So with that, any questions, comments?
Yeah, once they're treated, does it come back after that?
That's a very good question, Rich. So the life cycle is, once it's found, and has it been in New Prague for more than a year or two? My professional opinion is, yes, it has. We just haven't probably realized it. I've had some trees looked at by MDA, and it's been native boards. But to answer your question, it's usually a life cycle, like I said, of about 10 to 13 years. And once that time period goes by, from when it's, you know, when we noticed it, it's that 10 to 15, 13-year period. It depends on the climate of the area. And by that time, they will kill all the trees, all the ash trees, and that's their food. Once their food source is depleted, they'll move on or perish. Treatment is usually on an average about $90 a year to keep an ash tree alive. And that, you know, that's an average. There's obviously large ones that two of us couldn't put our arms around, and then there's some smaller diameter ones that would be a lot more reasonable. It's here.
But that would be for the.
We can't run from it.
That would be for the life of the tree then?
Pardon me?
That would be for the life of the tree, is you'd have to do that
have to
yearly?
be treated.
Okay.
So, and with the treatment I use, I would have to, or I'd come back, you know, once every 2 years, so it'd be like a 7-year period of time. And we have to, I'm thinking the responsibility of the council is to notify that there will not be any survivors unless they're taken care of. And I'd hate to be a council member or mayor at the time of which we lost all the ash trees in the city of New Prague. That wouldn't be a good legacy, in my opinion, so.
Doug, what kind of trees can you replace those with?
Well, there's numerous varieties. I'd highly recommend, you know, the natives, oak, hackberry, lindens, catalpa. There's numerous varieties of trees, you know, that can be used to replace. But I think we need to take a look at what we're losing.
Yeah.
And you know, can the city or can anyone afford to treat every ash tree in the city of New Prague? No, we can't. But, you know, if there's some specimen trees, for an example, the ones that were by the library, in my opinion, 1 or 2 of those could have been saved. They're probably over 100 years old or more. It's just something to think about.
Ken just stepped aside, but weren't we gonna do an inventory of?
So yes, we have received our approval for our Emerald Ash Borer grant, and part of our EAB plan is to do a full inventory, at least of all the public trees. I don't know, maybe Matt knows. Do you know if our
Public trees, not private.
Just public trees is what the inventory includes. But yeah. So part of our plan is to proactively go out and figure out which trees we may want to treat, which trees we are willing to let go of, and then maybe even proactively removing some so that we can get new trees planted, and that way we don't just suddenly one day have them all wiped out and have to start from ground zero.
Is there a good way to tell an ash tree? I mean, your company did my lawn stuff for years, you know, when you still had it, and Brent still does. But that one tree in my backyard, I don't know if you can remember it or not, was that an ash? I don't even know how to tell, but it looks really thin and really.
I'll come and take a look at it. And again, you know, I'm not gonna charge for that service, coming out and taking a look. So, you know, if anyone knows anybody that is unsure, or hopefully within your advertising, you know, you tell folks that, it's not gonna cost them to have me come out. Or have it, others don't charge either, other tree businesses. You know, that way, I know Mr. Wolf has decided to start treating his, which is a very good decision, and
That grant,
save 'em.
is that grant to pay for the actual, if he comes out to fix it, will the grant pay for it, the same grant that?
So, I mean, the grant was given to the city, which is what we're using, like I said, for this inventory. We're using it for the removal of some trees. We are using it to start a tree farm, so we have a stock on hand that we can start replacing trees with. As of this point, I don't think the grant is eligible for work on private citizens' property.
And it would be nice if there was, room for some ads.
Yeah,
To let
maybe we
the city folks know that,
Yep.
or citizens know that it's,
Mm-hmm.
it's imminent. I mean, we can't run
Well,
from it.
Then again, Doug, just to use your expertise on it, how can we communicate that, like, in my scenario, I don't know if it's an ash tree or not, or it's just something else that got sick, or it's just
Well,
a normal life
you know,
cycle, or?
I would just let folks know that, you know, that there are services available, you know, locally through, you know, through tree businesses, that can come out and ID your trees, and they don't, I know I don't charge, and I don't think others would either. You know, you just take the time and go and visit with the folks and, you know, tell them if they have an ash tree or not, you know, give them a quote, give them alternatives. I've turned people down that wanted to treat trees when they have other specimen trees, oaks, walnuts, maples right next, and let them go. There's no sense in treating that when it's getting overshadowed anyway by a great, or a good existing tree. So, you know, don't treat it, let it go, you know, use it for firewood.
Well, maybe this is something we could put in our newsletter,
Newsletter,
you
yep.
know, as a stuffer that
We
go in the
have-
utility bill.
We have done that many
Yeah.
times over the last 5 years. We've ran it in our newsletter. We had Patrick wrote an article about it when we found it last year
Yeah, I
at
remember.
Northside Park. I agree with Doug. This is something we've been working on for 5 to 10 years already. The trees around the library, we actually replaced the large trees that were taken down. We had 6 trees underneath them that we planted about 6 years ago, being prepared for this. So this is nothing that we are blindsided by no means. We started a tree farm about 10 years ago, preparing to replace a bunch of trees, and now we're actually adding another tree farm. So,
Yeah, I know the
I know
city.
as the park board member, you are aware of this, that
Yeah,
we've been
yes.
talking about this for years, so.
Yeah, and I know that the city has been very well prepared in dealing with emerald ash borer. But to your point, you know, private citizens, private property, you know, those trees will get infected, and it will continue to spread to other
Right.
residents. So that's the thing I was suggesting of,
Yeah.
I know we've put it in the newsletter, but, you know, it's here, folks, and spring is coming, and people are gonna be outside, and maybe it's just a good little nudge.
Right, and I think the main thing, if I was a council member, and could wave a magic wand, I would definitely tell the folks that there will not be any survivors.
Yeah.
They just need to be told that, and it's critical, it's an epidemic or whatever, and we're used to that, obviously, with other health reasons and stuff, but, yeah, and there will be no survivors, I think that's a key that, you know, the council members have to take into consideration to educate the citizens, and not only the folks in the city limits, but, you know, in the area too, so. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
If you have
Thank you,
any
Doug.
questions,
Give you a
not
call.
in the phone book, but just ask Bruce, he's got my.
Thanks, Bob.
Thank you.
Very much, appreciate it.
Yeah, good information. All right, we have no public hearings, no ordinances, resolutions, so general business yep, forfeited handguns. So who's up on that? Tim?
Yeah, thank you. We have right now, part of what I've been doing is inventorying and going through property that we have at the police department, both forfeited evidence, vehicles, things of that nature. Right now, we have two handguns that were administratively forfeited, and in the memo, I've attached the correspondence from the attorney's office indicating that that process has since awarded us the forfeited guns due to statute relating to forfeiture. Moving forward with what we do with those guns, now that they're the property of the city, we did not pay any money for those. The city is not out any money for that. In speaking with agencies now, that's the majority of agencies are choosing to have those guns destroyed for a variety of reasons, most namely being able to track those back to a police department as being sold to somebody, and we would sell them to a federally licensed dealer. However, we can't control what happens beyond that. With guns being out in the public, I'm in support of people having guns legally, but I wouldn't want the city to be in a position to have to explain why that gun was used in a crime or something to that nature in the future down the road. I don't think that the values that we would get for those guns is worth that risk to the city, is why I'm recommending that we have those guns destroyed securely.
I saw that the value of the guns, that the city takes 70, the county takes 20, and
Yeah.
the state takes 10. Do we still, if we destroy it, do we still owe that value to
No,
the county? Oh,
no,
okay.
if we destroy it, then we just send a letter to the attorney's office that the property's been destroyed and there's no disbursement of funds at that point.
Okay.
Okay, any other questions? Otherwise, I'll make a motion to accept the recommendation of the police chief to destroy the forfeited guns in the city of New Prague's possession.
Second.
Any other discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Okay, we're to the end of it, miscellaneous, there's, I see, the planning minutes and all the other minutes. I'll go around the horn. Maggie, do you have anything?
I do not.
Sean?
Nope.
I don't. Bruce?
I'm just gonna follow up on the library trees, just, and I think we were all aware of that, but I was just trying to explain it to somebody. I don't remember how that worked. Were those already diseased and we determined to cut them down, or were they?
So I think we took down 6 total. 4 of them we found the disease in them. 2 of them were actually a hazard. We had some pretty large limbs already falling off of them. We did not see anything in them, but that doesn't mean they didn't have it. But yeah, we had some issues with safety concerns. They were right by the sidewalk.
Okay. And then the idea of a specimen tree, and I know that's part of the inventory process, but it would seem like that, because time is of the essence, it sounds like, that we should identify those specimen trees that we determined we want to save sooner than later.
Yes, I would agree with that.
So is that something?
That's something that we'll be working on this year. Yep.
Do we get software then to inventory the trees? I think is that what part of the money is going towards?
That is correct.
Okay, yeah.
Yep, so we have, the software right now we're using is Tree Plus, but, me and Ken are in the process of, looking at trying to join everything as all in one. We have all of our sanitary, water, electric, everything's all in one right now. We're trying to move that most likely eliminate Tree Plus and put it all into one GIS network. So that's what we're working on right now, is going out for bids
nice.
for that.
It'll be good.
So the Trees Plus, we bought the software, but we're not gonna use it then?
We didn't buy the software. It's one of those that so we use Bolton Mink right now.
Okay.
They hold our device, or they hold our, information, but we own the information. So it's kind of like, they kind of operate it for us.
So you can add it to it.
Yes, constantly, yep. You can constantly add new items, so we're looking at maybe, adding the tree, getting rid of the Tree Plus and adding it to that, yes.
I think that's all I have.
I'm just confused a bit. So the tree can be saved with treatment, because Doug referred a couple times that 8 to 10 years, there isn't gonna be a tree left.
I got a little confused.
So I know I was speaking to my father-in-law, who was a forester. He said a tree can be saved with treatment, but you're going to treat it for the rest of its life.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, so I mean, it's gonna be that tree lives for 200 years, you may have to treat it for 200 years, unless for some reason, 50 years from now, some climate cycle kills off the ash borer.
I see, okay.
I got nothing either.
Okay, Patrick? Matt,
I got nothing.
congratulations again.
Thank you.
Let's
I'm-
make
I'm
this
awake,
official.
Right? I haven't fallen asleep yet.
Are you back to work? Or,
I will be in April.
okay, so you just came tonight just to say hi?
I missed you guys.
We just wanted to get out there.
You wanted to get away.
Practice run.
Okay. Tim?
Just a brief update, we did update we advertised for our applicants for a police officer, we had 5 total applicants, and we conducted 3 interviews, so to be determined at this point, we're still
Okay.
reviewing the 3 that we interviewed, and we'll see where it goes, but
You're doing what?
reviewing the 3
okay.
that we interviewed, and we'll see where that goes, but again, it's the lowest number that we've ever had. So we'll continue to do what we can.
Okay. Josh?
I got nothing.
Wow. Okay, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Second, and all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries.
I still don't get how these things work.
Just take the back piece out. This back piece comes off.